Start for real.
Start for real. You might have been the first words on this one, Colin. Hey, everybody. Welcome to wasmCloud Wednesday for Wednesday, October the 9th. As promised, today is the community road mapping session for community roadmap planning session, sure, for quarter 4, 2024. So what we're going to be doing today is just rolling through a couple of issues that we're going to do a retrospective on the quarter 3 2024 roadmap, the one that we brainstormed in, gosh, I guess it was, what is time? June? That sounds right. Maybe July. I don't know. We can look back on the community meeting before. We'll take a look at that roadmap, do a little retrospective on what we've been able to get done and some of our goals, and then move on to the quarter 4 board where we can talk about some of the features that we have pulled on already to the roadmap. Some of the things that came from your all's feedback. The main way that I gathered issues that we should be putting onto the quarter 4 roadmap is either in our wasmCloud Slack. I was also keeping an eye on the Cloud Native, the CNCF Slack, and the wasmCloud channel. That's also a great place. And I used the GitHub discussions feature to talk about to give this an open space. Anybody who has a GitHub account can comment, and I think that worked pretty well. OSS fellow, our own Masood left a really amazing summary here, which I've incorporated into 1 or 2 issues, but there's maybe 1 or 2 that we need left. So let's go ahead and take a look. This is what is captured as the roadmap on our documentation site, 2024 quarter 3. So what is that? June, no, July, August, September, the work that we've done pretty much over the last 3 months. I did pull up some specific numbers last time about, how many issues we closed, how much work we got done. And I think that was neat. And really, instead of just like raw amount of work that we've done in the wasmCloud side, because it does far eclipse what we plan on the roadmap, because we find a bug, we're going to fix it. We have a new super cool idea with something that just lands in WebAssembly, we're going to incorporate it. The roadmap is really meant to be a place of clarity, so you can see some of the high level goals of what we're working on as a project, and something that you can look at as a contributor to do something that's high value if you're looking to contribute to the project. So I think that we've done a really great job going through the quarter 2 roadmap, or sorry, quarter 3 roadmap. You'll note that before we were denoting this in terms of minor versions for wasmCloud, I think that this doesn't really hold as true anymore. In the past couple months of community calls, we've talked about upping our release cadence for wasmCloud. So, new features land that are awesome. Let's get a couple of them together and cut a minor release. Let's not hold ourselves to a slower release cadence, once a quarter. So we've already released wasmCloud 1.3. So everything for the new milestone will just be noted as Q4 for quarter 4 2024. Kept it short because why not? So taking a look at what we have accomplished over quarter 3, we've done quite a bit in addition to what we've planned on the roadmap, but we have a ton of interesting stuff that we've got done here. We actually still have quite a good bit that is a work in progress that has yet to land. I'm not anywhere near upset about that, though. Actually, this one, consolidate wasmCloud Helm charts. I think we're of the opinion that we can actually close this out, but I'll leave that for slightly after this call. Sharing components and providers between manifests, linking between manifests is something that a PR is open for now, so not too upset about that. Wash Dev version 2 has in its first stage landed. It's available in Wash now. People can try it out. It's actually really awesome, the developer experience there. And I know that everything else here that's in progress is making good strides. So I don't really feel any I'm not disappointed really by this not landing by October 1, right? Like, these are things that is not something that we need to keep so strictly to. It's really just for clarity and to put things up on the board. One of my goals for I guess more importantly here, the things that we haven't started are pieces that we may have even talked about in quarter 2. But I think not moving out of the triage phase, something where we want this means that it wasn't something that was really important to get done during this phase for wasmCloud. Like I think that the host configuration file feature is something that we will do. It is certainly really nice when you get to managing wasmCloud at a platform layer, like getting to manage it with one configuration file. But we just haven't quite needed it yet, and that's okay. Um, the general rule of thumb, I think, with goals, and maybe this is an OKR-ism, is like you should probably be accomplishing about 70%, 75% of what you set out to be. And that's a good number. If you do 100% of the things, you could have planned for more. I think adopting the new OCI WASM standard for WRPC based providers is something that we always kind of want to do, but never really makes it onto the priority list. So I'm okay with letting this just kind of drop off this roadmap. I think embedding WIT in the provider OCI spec is maybe more inspiring, but it really hasn't been needed. So and that's okay. And then same thing with robust data type support with wash call. We've been getting by okay with the current pretty naive implementation and the ability to call an HTTP handler with wash call. So, these things are, I think great ideas. I think they're totally always open for community contribution. It just means that contributors and maintainers didn't really get to it during this quarter, and that's okay. So as far as retrospective goes, I'm super happy because one of my biggest goals was that I think that 50% of the things, at least 50% of the things on the wasmCloud roadmap should be taken by wasmCloud contributors, either new or repeat contributors. Rather than just wasmCloud maintainers, which I think if you look at the spread of faces across this, if you look at the spread of officially assigned faces across this roadmap, we've done a really fantastic job on. So thank you all in the community for not just suggesting features, but taking it too. I don't want to spend too much more time on quarter 3 though. So if folks have any like blocking questions, please let me know. Otherwise, I can just move on to the new fun stuff. Sweet. So I think every roadmap we kind of try and come up with a theme, the goals of a specific quarter. And I think that, if you look back at quarter 2, we're really focusing on the developer experience. If you look back at quarter 1, it's, one of the first roadmaps we did. Same thing. I was thinking of this one actually, which is leveraging WebAssembly standards. If we look at the most recent roadmap, we're focusing on using the transparency of components to improve the developer experience for testing and building and deploying. And I think where this has really come to light lately is the experience that we've demonstrated with Wash Dev, where we can build a component and then inspect that built component for its imports and exports, and then run a developer iteration loop, kind of automatically standing up the providers that you need. So this really helps cut out a couple of steps in the wasmCloud developer experience. I think that our latest efforts with the component SDK in Go for building, standards compliant components, and for the Go testing framework to be able to, use the native debugger are all really wonderful experiences in building and testing applications. So if I'm to propose any theme of, this quarter 4, it's that I think with wasmCloud, we have a tendency to do we have a tendency to do a lot of things. There are a lot of really exciting features to add when we're thinking of taking advantage of NATS APIs or new advancements in the WebAssembly space. And what I really want to focus on for this quarter is, additive new features are great. We have some pretty exciting stuff coming down the pipe in terms of, a wasmCloud, a multi-tenant wasmCloud host. But what I really want to focus on are are bug fixes. I really want to focus on taking components and continuing to use the experience with a wash dev and improving that so that the developer experience and iteration loop feels really, really polished. And I want to keep this high bar that we are kind of constantly raising in terms of testing wasmCloud, testing components, testing providers. So the theme, I've done this before in like an agile sprint planning model where you'll have a sprint every once in a while that's just polish, right? Like there are things that you've put out that you need to maybe add a couple integration tests for, or maybe there's just one rough edge of an experience that if we just fix that up, it would make the CLI feel a whole lot better. And I want quarter four to kind of be this like polish quarter. So not focusing too much on, I think what we've seen is that the base of Wasm Cloud, especially now, provides this really great ability to use the building blocks of Wasm Cloud to build applications, the custom capability providers, custom capabilities, the little SDKs. So let's slap some polish on all of that and just focus on making the experience wholesale better. Um, all right, enough pontificating. Moving on to what I've kind of brought onto the quarter four roadmap so far. The first one, we added the ability to do essentially path-based routing on the HTTP server in, I think, version 23, whatever. But the real benefit here is that this is a simple implementation, but something that works decently well for a single tenant application where you have one HTTP server listening on one port, but can forward different paths, different requests that hit different paths to different components. So you can run one HTTP server and then many, many components that listen on a single path and then handle requests from there. Um, I think this was someone requested this from the community to have documentation on how to use this. And I think that this is actually a pointer to a broader who said this before? Maybe it was Victor had mentioned that we kind of have this README sprawl. Sorry, Victor, if it wasn't you, but we have this sprawl of READMEs across the Wasm Cloud project. So if you take a look at the HTTP server provider README. There's a lot of interesting information here about how it's implemented. Here's how to build it. Here's how to use the configuration, and then set up your WADM. And all of this is super useful. But to find it, you would have to know to go to the Wasm Cloud repo, go under crates, and then go under the HTTP server, and then there's the docs, right? And I think we follow this pattern for a lot of our examples too. So the key piece that I want for this feature is to try and pull some of that information off of these READMEs. Our documentation site has Algolia search implemented for it. So if you wanted HTTP server documentation, you can hit the doc site and search HTTP server and find this, know how to use it. And then, of course, the README for the provider can point to the docs page. So this is kind of step one. We have many other ways that we do this as well, like for other providers and examples. But I think if this goes well and is nice and searchable, we should kind of repeat this. I think after I mention each feature, I'll probably just pause really quick. But if you have comments in the community meeting, just like do the raise hand thing. I think that would be a huge help for me, so I don't pause too long. Sweet. So if we really like this, then, or Eric, I saw you came off video, so feel free if you want to say a thing.
Just I think this is a great way to polish our existing body of documentation where we, like you say, just have some things sort of fragmented out there. Really good priority for this quarter, I think.
Awesome. Yeah, yeah, that sounds good. I think we've definitely optimized for the developer who's cloning the repo, taking a look at things. But this will help get it in a central place. Um, Similar to that, I think I'll actually put this in the documentation side just so that we can keep talking about it. We now have the ability with Wash to generate Markdown based documentation for everything in the command line. I'm not sure if you've seen this before, but on the docs page, if you hit the Wash CLI, this is actually all auto generated from our clap stuff. Our doc comments fully matches the CLI. We should totally do this for the wasmCloud binary as well. In addition to that, we have another feature. I don't know if it's on this roadmap, but we have another one to do it for the wasmCloud.toml format as well. This kind of set of features just really helps us on the wasmCloud side make sure that our documentation is always up to date. Auto generating this documentation is kind of a slam dunk and really, really helps. So I pulled this onto the Q4 in the name of keeping documentation up to date. I think this is it's kind of a slam dunk. We should be looking out for other places that we can do this as well. Like in Wasm, we generate the JSON schema from the Rust types that we use to parse the manifest. So that's something that we could consider publishing on the docs as well. Yeah, Masood, go ahead.
Hi, Brooks. Is this considered or is going to or supposed to be just a migration from the current document generation to, let's say, clap-based document generation, or the documentation itself, let's say what the binary has embedded wants to be improved too? Because those are two different things. As a chore, we could help, but for content improvement, then we need also people to review the content and comment on the content. And there is a different cycle that is involved.
Yeah, I think this feature specifically talks about places in the documentation where we've taken a look at maybe what the flags are in wasmCloud and then kind of handwritten docs. I think that this feature will specifically touch on like not doing that anymore. So in the name of keeping docs fully updated, I think when we do that, we might find that our quality of documentation, maybe for a specific flag, isn't enough to fully explain the feature, and we should improve that as we come across it.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. On that same vein, just continuing down the documentation side, this one's actually in the main repo because it's kind of a piece of feedback that touches a lot of different things. I think it would be really wonderful to revisit our wasmCloud Quick Start. The Quick Start that we have today, we kind of released as we added support for WebAssembly components, which was, quite a few months ago now. I think there's been a lot of improvements in the ecosystem. There's been a lot of improvements, like especially on the Go side with BindGen. A lot of, we published the wasmCloud component crate, which is fully available to use on the Rust side. JavaScript and Python have had improvement. There've been a ton of improvements. So I think we should revisit the Quick Start because it is the first touch point for a developer, a platform engineer, someone coming across wasmCloud, to check us out. I think this would be a multi-phase process. This one should actually be in progress because we've kind of started on this one. The first phase of this is changing over the Quick Start to use Wash Dev rather than this very explicit, like, stand up this host locally and here's all the infrastructure you have and then you can deploy onto it. Like the Wash Dev change here is very, you pick your source language, something that you like, and then you're going to build this WebAssembly component. And like, we're going to do all the other stuff for setting this up, but here's your component using HTTP. So here's this endpoint to hit, and then, go from there. I think that in the theme of doing less, we can remove a lot of the upfront burden of learning for people with wasmCloud. Right now when you hit the Quick Start, there's kind of a ton of like a wall of bricks that hits you on new terminology. So making this, I call this fully featured. It's kind of hard to encapsulate this, but the Quick Start is something that we can definitely improve now. So yeah. Feels good. This one is, all of these on the roadmap. I'm sorry I didn't mention this in the beginning. If you go to the wasmCloud repository and hit projects, we have the wasmCloud roadmap as a GitHub project. So this and all of the issues that I'm talking about are all, open on this roadmap. So should be easy for folks to find. Okay. Moving on from there into the new feature zone. Thank you so much, Masood, for dropping a whole lot of feedback on on the roadmap discussion. I was really trying to go through this and holistically capture some of the things here. And so I want to touch on this, just to give this special attention for now to mention how it showed up on the roadmap, and then please give me feedback on what else we need to capture here, because I want to make sure that I did you justice. So first of all, really appreciate the preamble here. I think that you're calling out a very real need here where the provider SDK and changes in the host can the changes can kind of sneak up on you. I think it can sneak up on maintainers as well. If we have a change in WRPC transport, or we make a change in the host to change how we're delivering a link to a provider, for example, we need to be very specific around when there's an update that you need to make to a provider that you've written before. Where this shows up on the roadmap is on the right here. There's an improvement. I guess you could call this a new feature. But what we really need right now for our testing suites for providers is to be able to run the provider tests with the provider SDK against the version of the host that's in main. So often this is unreleased, maybe a patch version ahead, maybe a minor version ahead. And a suggestion that I hope I put on here. Yes. It is to run it with the currently released version of the host. We do this with our wash tests right now. So basically we will use the locally built version of wash from main, and then, version 34 to run a suite of tests to make sure, as we drift between versions, we're not drifting in functionality. So I think that this will really tightly cover our provider SDK, since it is a touch point for a lot of developers who write a custom provider. Make sure that as we go version to version of the host and of the provider SDK, there's no breach in contract there. I think that there's still some more work for us to do around creating the most stable API for capability providers, and that's okay. The really big thing I want to focus on here is making backwards compatible changes and additive features. Yeah, Masood.
First of all, thank you very much for capturing my feedback and reflecting it in this issue. I really appreciate that. The real issue is, as I described, around breaking changes usually when they catch you off guard, and suddenly everything that you were testing yesterday up to a point is not working. The reality is that the product is under heavy development and active development, and that's the reality. That's not something that any of us are denying. It's just that better communications or knowing that kind of a breaking change is upcoming, for example, as a notification even on a Slack. Like the emphasis this year on improving developer experience is the right move. Everybody knows that for product growth, for wasmCloud growth, is necessary for people to find it easier, to get engaged and use it. But what I'm saying is that some of us are developers on the provider side, which is on the back end, and we need to slowly have some improvements in terms of experience of the provider developers too, in order to make sure that basically they feel that like one of the things is that right now a provider is not as privileged as the host in respect to what it can do. And if we consider providers an extension of the host, we need to think about how they augment and at what level, and do we treat everything, in a so on and so forth. So I'm not going to take time. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think that all makes a ton of sense. And yeah, I was actually just rereading some of our documentation this morning, and the capability providers docs, really talks about, the point of capability providers is so that you can you can extend the functionality of the Wasm Cloud host at runtime in a pluggable, secure way. So continuing to hold ourselves to that bar is really important. Um, yes. Okay. I think you gave us continually some great feedback here around RFCs and how we are getting major features added to Wasm Cloud, which is great. The other one I noticed, Masood, you did mention a couple of things that you were interested in working on that may stretch into next quarter, or things that are kind of in draft. So what I did reflect on the roadmap is the Nats provider blob store. I added this feature here, which let me go ahead and tag you on it, just for visibility. I added a very this is not specced out at all. So we should collaborate on the description of this one. But I think that this
If you,
is
sorry, if you assign this to me right now, if you want,
okay.
I can add description.
Can I not do this? Okay. Well, maybe I can't, but if you want to open up an issue on the Wasm Cloud side and just so that you can have full description powers and everything, I'll add it to the roadmap instead of this one.
Sure.
Okay. No rush on that, but thank you. I just wanted to make sure that it was here so that we didn't forget it. Um, I think that this is a great feature to add in, because the Nats key value store provider that you wrote is what we use for Wash Dev now. To have a built-in key value store, it's super nice.
So the view that I'm taking, Brooke, is that, in a lot of the small installations, we should try to squeeze as much as we can now that the NATS is part of the fabric, out of the NATS in order to, reduce reliance on other infrastructure.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. I think as we have, we have messaging, we have key value. When we get object store, blob store for Nats object storage as well, now we no longer need to write to like the temporary directory on the local file system, which is kind of neat. We can just kind of reuse the Wasm Cloud functionality, and that kind of exposes it to the whole lattice. It makes a lot of sense. So the other one, only other one that I grabbed from this feedback here is the wish list to see a custom provider or a custom interface, basically handling a resource. I think that would be I think it's a great thing to add. Oh, okay. I added that as an item here, but I have it filtered out, I think. Oh, there's a lot more stuff in there. Well, we're gonna put that back on. I think it is a good suggestion to get the custom provider handling a resource. I think we go back and forth on this on the Wasm Cloud side because resources are always going to be less efficient to pass over the wire than a concrete type. So coming with caveats on when to use a resource, I think is a requirement there. But showing how you can use it, I think would be a good example to add. So let me write that down as something that we need to add to the roadmap here.
You know, the reason that I'm showing kind of maybe too much passion about having support for resource in custom providers is that more complex use cases usually involve, you had it recently with secrets, right? Some resources are really better expressed as resources, and that's not available right now to custom providers.
Yeah. Yeah, I think secrets would be probably the best example for us to use for this one.
Brooks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so the okay, I want to clarify something which goes to your point about documenting some stuff. Like when we released 1.0, we did not support resources for it just because of some of the limitations of WRPC. That has changed. Like by default, it will support resources insofar as I know. If Roman is on the call, he can smack me if I'm wrong. But the main thing is when you should be defining a WRPC specific interface for performance reasons. That should be really the documentation because as far as I know right now, you can just like a lot of the things like a key value where the resource is literally just like a string handle. That one's just fine. You don't need to do much. So what we need there is documentation, like you were saying, Brooke. So like we need some examples of what this looks like when you do a walkthrough, and like when you would want to use something for a like a WRPC resource, when you want it to like basically have you map what would normally be like a resource and have a bunch of methods on it to be like a handle that then the WRPC thing can be translated over to. So anyway, there's a bunch of stuff there. I just want to call out. You can, like, because Masood, you're not the only one who's brought something up about like resources and stuff lately. And I wanted to make it clear that as insofar as I know, we do support it by default with the latest WRPC stuff. The issue is the documentation on that we can do that. I actually made sure that was updated in some docs I'm going to be pushing up for the dependency stuff here soon. And then also making sure we have a concrete example of what to do and when you might want to define a custom interface around WRPC and how to handle it that way, for performance reasons, especially for a provider. So just calling that out here.
So may I make two comments, Taylor? One is that I spent 3 weeks and that just the last one was last week, I mean, the last of the 3 weeks, trying to experiment with resources. I turned on resource support in runtime and tried to experiment with that. And the platform, I think it's there in the protocol, but there are parts of the platform that are unknown to somebody like me that doesn't know the platform plumbing intimately, that still do not work with this because I try to trick this from both ends and it always errors out in runtime. That's one thing. The other thing is that I do believe, again, I have gone through every line in the runtime. I do believe that, cases that we have we have there about WRPC variant of the WASI makes sense when you have a public interface because you would have multiple implementations of that. But when you have a single implementation, usually doesn't make sense to have that. And right now, a custom provider also has no way of kind of augmenting the runtime to say that I'm creating my own version of WRPC. So we have to write both the WRPC side and the so-called WASI side or custom side, which doesn't make sense for a single provider. So that's why I'm saying that, the platform still does not have the right plumbing to unblock resource support in custom providers.
I really do think it's a documentation issue because I remember when it came out, I started messing around with the stuff that we did have. and making that work. And honestly, like it comes down to like, oh, I'm building a single custom provider. What do I do? Well, here's the steps you take. Right now, it's just not very clear because that has been moving very fast, thanks to some great work from Roman. So what we'll need to do is make sure this is all documented properly, and we have the walkthroughs for each of the steps. That's something we can work with. You know, Eric is our great documentarian. So
Thank you.
like that's what we want. Like the thing is it's not that you're the assertion here is not that you're wrong. You probably have run into it and keep running into errors. The assertion is that it is possible, we just have not documented it very well. And so we want to make sure that that gets documented properly. We describe what the like gotchas are and make sure that those are all very, very clearly out there for everybody. That's what I think should be the goal here.
And then maybe we can bring vector databases and those to the platform. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I am gonna go. I went ahead. I'm just not gonna forget about it later. Added this to the Wasm roadmap now to make sure that we have some documentation. We can do some documentation to talk about, you know, how to use resources in custom interfaces, the use of WRPC interfaces, like why we use them for performance reasons, what you should be doing, and then, you know, if this is something you're doing, then how to use them. I think it's a good thing to have there. Making sure we move on from there so that we have enough time to talk about the rest of the fun stuff. Again, Masood, thank you so much for your thoughtful comment on the GitHub discussion. It was a huge help for getting a lot of these issues triaged and ready to go for this quarter. The other feature that I didn't add that you mentioned that may bleed over into quarter one, obviously you are welcome to contribute that at any time. So I think Ati is on the call, right? Yeah, this one was inspired by your feedback on a lot of the Wash and wasmCloud PRs lately. We have a lot of millisecond parsing for our time values. And, you know, historically, this is pretty fine, right? You know, you're going to wait for 2000 milliseconds for all of your NATS messages to come back, or you're going to wait 300 milliseconds for capability providers to shut down. Like, these are pretty understandable values. We've started to have a couple time values that are, thanks for coming, Nikki. Oh, and he's gone. We're starting to have a couple of values that are larger, like in the minutes. And it's kind of annoying to specify, like, yeah, you can wait for 600,000 milliseconds. So I really like the idea of using like the human time crate. I think we've started on this. Like there is one flag, a new flag that went into Wash that used the human time duration. But I think this is generally what people expect. And we should be able to make these changes in a pretty well backwards compatible way. So I think that inline flags and environment variables as input to wasmCloud, we should use human time because people interact with CLIs. They're humans and they yeah. And so that's where we should use it. We don't really need to update our protocols here. I still think it's fine to send milliseconds over the wire, like for the control interface, to avoid a breaking change there. So yeah, this one is a great first issue. Be careful though, Aditya is probably going to pick this up before you know it. I think this would be a really good one too. Yep, I knew it. I think this would be. He commented and said he wanted to work on it. I think this would be a great improvement for what we do to keep this as a standard. And then I just had a couple notes about backwards compatibility here. So good stuff. Moving on from there, this has been on my wish list for quite a little while, so I have hoisted it into the roadmap. Please feel free to deny me if you don't like it. But I think that right now we do have clap completion for our CLI. So like if you type in wash git inv and then hit tab, it can autocomplete to inventory. Like we can autocomplete on the subcommands, but we don't have autocomplete for arguments. And I think that would be really, really helpful here for control interface and app commands. The situation that I run into a lot is I'll deploy like our Rust Hello World example, and all I want to do is type wash app undeploy Rust and then hit tab and then have that autocomplete. This is something that Clap autocomplete totally supports. Same thing with like stopping a component or something where you can type in the beginning of the component ID and then hit tab. It just kind of feels like a slam dunk in terms of developer experience. Thank you, Yakin, for backing me up. um, it would just be nice. So I think that this is something that people tend to expect from CLIs, and it's jarring to reach a point where, or to like use a CLI and it doesn't work. So I think this would be a great, just like initial developer experience. Like it's just good. I've gotten some backup in the chat, so I'm happy about it. But this one I think is also a great first issue because it just kind of hooks into, it uses an existing crate, just hooks into existing functionality that we have with Clap. And we could probably do this all over the place, but starting with the control interface and the app subcommands would immediately give a lot of value. Again, if you have any comments, just raise your hand. This one, people may or may not agree with me on this. So don't hate it. This is something that we talked about maybe a year ago, and I noticed it when I was unpinning issues that have been open for a long time. And with wash dev and wash up right now, we download the wasmCloud binary from GitHub, stick it in a downloads directory, and then run it. We do the same thing with Wasm. We do the same thing with Nats. And I think it would actually be really nice if we used the wasmCloud host crate and the Wasm crate to just embed wasmCloud and Wasm into like the foreground wash process, like especially for wash dev when we're kind of launching an ephemeral version or an ephemeral host and Wasm. And then when you hit Control C, you just want to kind of close it all down. We've seen a couple of issues stem from, when you execute the wasmCloud command locally, it succeeds, like it runs to start, but then something happens where you connected to Nats, but Nats didn't actually connect upstream to your supercluster. Somebody was working with NGS the other day and ran into this. So what I'd really like as a developer experience improvement is for the wash command to have a little bit more control over knowing when the host starts correctly, when Wasm starts correctly, and prevent this kind of issue where wash can cause like these runaway processes because we're executing binaries on disk. I think this would kind of improve portability too. But there are some questions here. Does anybody, I think that this is a little nuanced. Does anybody on the, anybody can speak up. Does anybody on the maintainer side feel like we just shouldn't bring this into the roadmap and we should think about this a little bit more before we commit to it?
I feel like it should be pushed to next week for a discussion because it could spiral.
Yeah. Okay. So
like you said, there's lots of nuance here because I can argue very strongly in both directions at this point. So, I think it might be good to maybe talk a little bit more next week with it.
I think that sounds good. Then let me boot this from the roadmap for now. But it doesn't mean we aren't going to do it or can't do it or whatever. We can always bring it on and get it done. All right. Okay. I think what would be, yes, hopefully that was welcome, or that I've been clear about that, but what comments are welcome from everybody on these issues. I think one of the things that we have a mechanism for today, but don't take enough advantage of, is the provider health. We publish this provider health checks on Nats or on cloud events every 30 seconds or so if the health check, succeeds or fails or changes state. And what I'd like to see when you deploy an application is if the provider reports itself as unhealthy during a during a status check, then we should reflect that in the application status. So the same way that Wasm currently will take a look at like a component scale failed or a provider start failed and say, hey, now your application deploy has failed, which is a huge improvement that came in pretty recently. I think we should also update the scalers in Wasm to pay attention to health checks as well. I think to start, we could just use the existing failed status for this, but it may be a good idea to add like an unhealthy or a just another status option to a Wasm application, just to say like I've deployed, but something is wrong. This is something that we can do without any changes to the host, so I've marked it as a good first issue since it just touches Wasm. This feels like a good thing to just kind of further surface those application level errors. I want to prevent people from going and diving in the logs as much as possible, surface that at like the wash app status level. Sweet. This is another one I found when I was deep diving earlier today. This still got some older language, so we should, update this to say, components and providers and all of that stuff. But we have done some benchmarking of wasmCloud. We've been looking lately a little bit more into the performance of streaming and doing batch operations. We've been really, really happy with the performance of wasmCloud in general, like it's building on top of NATS for RPC. I think it's really important that we revitalize this issue a little bit so that we can create a benchmarking suite, something we can run in CI that's consistent, that we compare from release to release to make sure that we are keeping really good performance in wasmCloud, and we can kind of like publish those numbers over time. It'd be really nice to have this so that we can say, go through and refactor a bunch of the code for handling links, and we can say, hey, before we did this, it was taking this long, and after we did this, it was 10% faster, or what have you. I think that'd be really nice. Or hey, we added this new security thing and it had a 1% impact on performance, something. So this is something that I want to bring forward on the roadmap. Just something basic would be good here, but I don't have this noted as a good first issue because I think that this would be really, this is something that's a little more sensitive, and setting up a good benchmarking suite that removes a lot of variables is a little bit more complex. So just because I'm marked as good first issue doesn't mean we aren't welcoming feedback. You just will want to touch base with the maintainers if you're planning on taking some of this. Another really big piece RFC that's landed in wasmCloud is this one from Dan, who talked about multi-tenancy. The last big RFC that Dan opened in wasmCloud was around secrets, which was a huge lift in the entire ecosystem. So I'm really looking forward to this one getting worked on as well. I don't know if this will be fully completed and stamped and out the door and everything in through the end of Q4, but I think this is certainly something that us on the maintainers are going to be discussing in wasmCloud Weekly, and adding feedback onto this issue. So it's worth noting as something we're working on through Q4. Not really anything else to say on that one. More than that, oh yeah, that's why I lost it. More than that, we talked about testing the provider SDKs against main. I'm just going to do actually, if you're in the Zoom right now or on YouTube or what have you, please raise your hand if you had a feature suggestion or something that you wanted to throw on the roadmap. We're getting near the end of the call, and I don't want to run out of time and then not get that section. So just raise your hand, and I'll pause. I think what would be really nice, this is a little bit of a broader issue, but moving wasmCloud.toml to a different directory than where the code actually is. And this kind of broadly speaks to assumptions that we make with wash dev and wash app deploy around where a wasmCloud.toml directory has to be, where the wit directory needs to be, where the build directory needs to be, you know, where all these files need to be in the space of a project. We should be able to configure this so that if we wanted to put the wasmCloud.toml under a different directory, that's fine. You may need to point wash build at that toml file, but it shouldn't have to be at the root of a project. I think this broadly helps us move in the direction of more of a not a mono repo, but a repo where multiple components and providers exist, because we can start, you know, setting up relative paths in a good project structure. So this is something that we'll for sure get to during this quarter. It's also a good first issue. You know, we have the ability to point wash at a different wasmCloud.toml. We just need to make sure that you can indicate the project directory in that build file as well. Yeah, Jonas.
I guess I don't think at least I haven't created an issue to capture this yet, and I don't remember if we have one already in the tracker, but a thing I want to get done as part of Q4 is the ability to set resource limits for components, at least. So that's something that I've been looking at, and if we don't have that on the roadmap, I'll create an issue for it, because I think it's going to be helpful to have. So yeah, that's just one thing that I want to throw on the roadmap for Q4.
Yeah, I think in addition to like our max concurrent instances lever, there's a lot of appetite for, you know, making sure that a single component doesn't use too much memory or, you know, infinitely loop during work forever. I saw your PR and which was like a mock-up of how you may want it to look in Wasm, which I think is a really nice way to approach this. Like, how is this going to be surfaced to people? So yeah, I will ask you to create that issue, but once the issue is there, I think that's totally a good thing to bring on the roadmap. Keeping going down the line. This one is another command bugaboo that I have that just kind of annoys me. There are a couple of imperative commands that we use in Wash, like wash scale component, to take a component with a specific ID and scale it to like a certain number, right? Or wash stop host. And basically all of these ones that take a host ID, it always feels like an extra chore to have to query the local list of hosts and then copy the host ID and then paste it in where the host ID is when there's only one. I think that we should just do the right thing in the Wash CLI. If there's a command that takes a host ID and there's only one locally, then we should just target the one. I think that we should be careful about we should probably be careful about implicit behavior. Like, we don't want to do too much automatically on behalf of the user. I think that tab autocomplete would probably help this one, but host IDs, for example, are something that you're always going to have to look up because we don't really have them. The auto-generated in key for a host ID is not something that usually sticks in your brain. So I think this would be a great little improvement. Not really too much to do here, but if folks, I did mark this as a good first issue, because if someone in the community takes this one, which I think is a good opportunity, the wash get inventory command already works this way. You can either supply a host ID to query a single host, or if you don't, it will query the list of hosts and then get the inventories for those hosts. So using that kind of prior art, I think would be a good way to get this done. So you'll notice a theme in some of the things that somewhat annoy me as a power user of Wash all the time, like these little shortcuts that make CLIs feel nice and polished. I think we should bring that in where we can. Okay. Other than that, there is an improvement. Thank you, Ahmed. Are you on here? Ahmed. Thank you, Ahmed, for updating this on the Wasm side. So we've in the kind of what is the right way to indicate this? Okay, at a broad level, like there's a precedent in like kubectl or Nomad, for example, where if you want to get all of a resource, you would say like kubectl get pods, and then if you wanted to get a specific resource, you would do kubectl get pods, and then provide the pod ID that you want to get, right? And this is a pretty well established frame of reference for like how CLIs work with a lot of cloud tools now. We've kind of gone in this direction for wash app get. It feels a little extraneous to have wash app list and wash app get. So what I think we should do is deprecate. This is actually two different APIs under the hood, or the same API under the hood, rather. Instead of doing wash app list, we should be able to do just like a wash app get. And then that gives you the list of all the apps. And then when you do wash app get with a specific application name, that gets you the output for that specific application. Welcoming feedback here. The real point of this is it's just one less command that you have to have in your muscle memory. I think we could do the same thing for wash app status, right? Like let's try and simplify the number of subcommands we have where we can, when it really is just not necessary. I mean, if you run wash app get today, it'll give you an error back to say, hey, give me an application name. So yeah, just continuing to simplify the CLI, I think is a good move. Other than that, I saved this one for last because it's fun. There is a little bit of a race condition right now in the way that we store. This is an internal thing, so you never would have ran into this unless you look at the host code called component specification. And the point of it is you have this entry in a KV bucket in Nats. So that's replicated across the entire lattice. Every single host can read it when it comes online. And it includes component, its component ID, and then all of the outgoing links from that component. So when you tell a host to start a component with a specific ID, it has all of the link information available. And that's kind of mapped very closely to the way that the components imports are organized. So mentally, it's a really good map of what to call over WRPC. The problem is that all of this happens in a single key for the component, it happens in a single key in the bucket. So I've laid out a little bit of the scenario of how this would happen. You have multiple hosts that essentially try to write to the entry at the same time, and we may overwrite some data, losing that link. In practice, this never happens if you're issuing your own commands, but Wasm, turns out, as a machine, is very quick at issuing a bunch of links at the same time. So this is possible to hit. Wasm recovers from it. It's not a huge deal, and you may have not seen this as an issue, but we should fix this. So this one is, I marked it as help wanted. I only opened it a few hours ago, but we have, it might be captured in a different issue, to be completely honest, but what I wanted to capture here is to address this because with distributed systems, these kinds of race conditions get nasty particularly quickly. And, of course, we don't want to be going down that route. So this is something that's probably going to be marked as, this won't be marked as a good first issue because we don't know the exact way that we want to solve this yet, because links are something that we're constantly improving. But once we spec out a solution, this might be something that any contributor could take to. Wow, that was a lot. There is one more that's in progress, sorry, around the component SDK Go. I did just note this release checklist. Yeah, one more thing. I noted this release checklist as something that should be coming out this quarter because I think that the improvements in the Go ecosystem with this component SDK and the WAJ testing framework really make our developer experience a whole lot better. So it should be captured here as something we're working on right now. Okay. Thank you all for listening to me chat for a little while, and all of your feedback that went into this roadmap. As I mentioned, this roadmap is really meant to be a high level focus on what you as a contributor and us as maintainers are kind of coming to prioritize for this quarter. So new roadmap, new me. If you're looking for something to contribute to, checking out this list and anything that's marked as good first issue is a great high value thing that we have fresh on the mind. Uh, as usual, I think we're going to end up doing a whole lot of work outside of this roadmap too. So, and that's okay. I think we are. I started a couple minutes after, so I think we like just hit an hour. But in the interest of feedback, does anyone have any last second questions, comments, feature suggestions for this roadmap? Aha, got that. Yeah, Masood.
One quick note, because you showed a bunch of improvements about the CLI experience. It's great that now we have improved, like printout for all the options that the voice CLI offers.
Mhm.
But it scrolls too much. Is it possible to add kind of paging? You know, when there is like 3 pages of options to select for the host?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a hard one. You just have a lot of options. One thing I tried to, I would love to simplify this, I guess is all I'm really saying. I've tried to look up a couple ways that we could like have a short help and a long help. I think Clap supports this, but it's not entirely obvious to me the way to denote those. Um, like having hidden advanced flags would be a really good idea. So just so that when you just do help, you can see the things that you almost like most commonly need to override. But then if you do help or whatever, then you can see all the options. Yeah, I think this would certainly be welcome. I just don't have an issue really spec'd out on what we would exactly want to do.
Just something to think about, not anything urgent or
Yeah,
too disturbing. Nothing. No.
no, I think it's a great suggestion. All right, folks. Well, then I think that covers it for today. I am going to take this roadmap, kind of what we put together, and write up a little spiel from this community call on what I think is the theme of the roadmap and what we're going to be focusing on. And we'll put that up for feedback on the website. It should be a little later this week, but. I think it kind of covers it for now. Thank you all so much for coming and contributing to the road mapping session, contributing to the roadmap as is, and just the general broader wasmCloud ecosystem. Um, but yeah, I think that's really it. I think we can go ahead and stop this one, and we'll see you all next week for our regularly scheduled community call.